right, well, without further ado, I'm going to start off with my commentary segment today, and it's really a critique of capitalism when it comes to something that all Americans claim they really value, and that's our privacy. So recently, I was unfortunately targeted by a hacker, and I was unfortunately surprised at the amount of data that has been compiled by various websites about me, about every single person who uses the internet. They get compiled by data brokers, packaged into nice little web pages, and then sold to pretty much anyone for a few dollars. And so it really started to make me question whether true privacy is available, is something that's accomplished through a capitalistic system. And the fact of the matter is, no, it's not. You cannot have privacy if there is a profit motive behind selling your data. So I wanted to talk about that today. Now, Ayn Rand, like many capitalists, believed that capitalism actually protected your right to privacy. In fact, she wrote the following: "Civilization is the progress toward a society of privacy. The savage's whole existence is public, ruled by the laws of his tribe. Civilization is the process of setting man free from men." Now, we are living in what's been referred to by various scholars as either data capitalism, surveillance capitalism, and it's become abundantly clear that Americans cannot really have true privacy if we are functioning under a system of capitalism. And as scholar Christian Fuchs puts it, profitability and capitalism's economic freedom come into contradiction with political freedom, democracy, and social freedom, fairness, and equality. Capitalism is based on generalized commodity production by workers who do not own the commodities they create. And honestly, unlike Ayn Rand, Silicon Valley capitalists are pretty transparent today about how little they value your privacy, your rights, your freedoms. I'll give you an example from 2009 when then Google CEO Eric Schmidt spoke to Maria Bartiromo, of all people, and seemed to say that, yeah, your privacy is being violated, but you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Take a look.
People are treating Google like their most trusted friend. Should they be?
Well, I think judgment matters. If you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Listen, even if you are the model citizen, even if you aren't doing something that's quote unquote bad, the fact of the matter is, under this system, your personal information is so widely available to various people who might want to actually cause harm. And we've seen some of the ramifications of that already. So for instance, credit bureaus, which collect all sorts of data on us, get hacked into. All of that information gets sold in the dark web, and you could be a victim of identity theft. So it's not even as if you need to be a bad person or do bad things for this type of commodification of data to negatively impact your life. But I want to give you some other examples that I think aren't being discussed enough. Now, oftentimes when we have these discussions, we miss out on the important topic of power, how this leads to additional power imbalances within society. And so in 2017, there was a great research paper written by Sarah Myers West. And here's what she argues. Data capitalism at its core is a system in which the commodification of our data enables a redistribution of power in the information age. If communication and information are historically a key source of power, data capitalism results in a distribution of power that is asymmetrical and weighted toward the actors who have access and the capability to make sense of data. This uneven distribution is enacted through capitalism and justified by the association of networked technologies with the political and social benefits of online community, drawing upon, and we all know this, narratives that generally fall within the rubric of technological utopianism. And we've heard all of those lies before. Oh, these social media outlets are great. They keep you connected. They help do this. They help do that. Without it, we wouldn't be able to keep in touch with old friends. But if you look at some more recent research into that, social media has actually isolated us and made us far less social. Now, while most people are under the impression that they're being provided a service that enables free speech, social media platforms that make these types of utopian statements about a connected world in reality create a situation where everyone becomes an unpaid worker. So let me explain. As, again, the scholar Christian Fuchs puts it, the users of advertising-based social media platforms are digital workers, the 21st century's digital proletariat. Because of the mistaken ideology that what is good for capitalist businesses' profits must be good for society, neoliberal politics and politicians are lax on privacy protections and regulating digital corporations. Business self-regulation does not work. It has become evident that it can easily advance threats to democracy. Fuchs also writes that data capitalism has an incentive to divide us. And we've certainly seen that in how social media has created these ideological bubbles, these thought bubbles. We've also noticed it in the type of advertising that definitely passes the bar at certain outlets, like Facebook, for instance. So Facebook treats personal data as a commodity in order to sell targeted advertisements. For Facebook, it does not matter if the ad is about chocolate cookies or fascism. It only cares about selling targeted ads for the sake of profit. It is therefore no surprise that Facebook has tolerated highly problematic data practices. Its logic is that the more online activity, data and metadata is generated, and the more potential profit emerges. Like, people are under the, this perception or this assumption that we're being provided this incredible free service, right? Facebook is a free social network, social media tool. Google is the biggest search engine in the world. But what does Google really sell? What Google sells is our data. All of that data is sold to third parties. That is Google's bread and butter, and that's certainly the bread and butter for Facebook as well. And so all of our data gets packaged up and sold. And unfortunately, that data does make us vulnerable to all sorts of bad actors on the internet, whether it be hackers, whether it be a stalker, it doesn't matter. So again, going back to what Eric Schmidt said earlier, this whole notion, this whole framing that you don't have to worry about anything as long as you're a good person, as long as you're a model citizen, it's absolute bullshit, and we all know it. Having this information readily available does make us vulnerable to bad actors, even if we're quote unquote good people who do nothing wrong. And then finally, I do want to just talk a little bit about regulation and whether, hey, maybe privacy can exist under a capitalistic structure if we just regulate properly, right? This is the kind of ideology that really drove a lot of Elizabeth Warren's campaigning during the Democratic primaries. But the fact of the matter is, under capitalism with a profit motive, you're always going to find situations in which corporations either find loopholes to regulations, either engage in government corruption to get these regulations lifted or loosened or weakened. And I do also want to give you a specific example, because in Europe, there were some regulations when it came to the use of cookies. But guess what? Corporations found a way around that. Online advertising companies reacted to these regulations by turning to new, more persistent technologies like flash cookies, which are embedded in Adobe's Flash Player, and web beacons, which track users through a small invisible pixel on their browser screen. At times, flash cookies can even be used to respawn deleted browser cookies, suggesting a particularly persistent effort to circumvent user controls. Now, what's even more terrifying is how web beacons work. So let's take a look at web beacons. Likewise, they suggest a persistent effort to monitor users' behavior. By using a single pixel GIF or GIF, depending on how you like to say it, image usually colored to match the background of a page or email, web beacons allow for the tracking of a tremendous amount of data on a user's behavior, their typed entries and mouse movements, clickstream data, information from previously set cookies, and even recording conversations through a computer's microphone or images from a computer's camera. And as I mentioned, our most basic personal information is collected and sold by these so-called data brokers. If you've ever Googled your name, you might notice that there are various websites like Fast People Search, for instance, that have made your most personal information widely available to the public. In fact, people can even get more in-depth personal information on you if they pay these data brokers a couple bucks. And what amazes me is how capitalism never ceases to miss an opportunity to hit the same people that they've already exploited again. And so now we're seeing the emergence of this whole new industry of services that are meant to help wipe your personal information off of the internet. Your personal information that was sold by various websites that you use every single day, some of them to stay connected to your friends, yes. Some of them that you're literally forced to use because of your job, because of your place of work. And so, unsurprisingly, you see these companies like Reputation Defender or Delete Me, which will charge you, in a lot of cases, hundreds of bucks to wipe the internet, in a lot of cases unsuccessfully, of your personal private data. So that's what capitalism has done to our privacy. I do not believe that you can have true privacy when there is a profit motive for Silicon Valley to sell your personal data. And so we do need to question the economic system under which we're functioning if we claim to really care about our privacy rights. And some might argue, well, look, we don't have any constitutional protections when it comes to unreasonable searches and seizures by private corporations. But as we all know, private corporations work with the federal government all the time to share all sorts of private data and communications we've engaged in the name of national security. So that's one other thing to think about if you hear this nonsense defense of private corporations violating our privacy.
Wow, that was great, Anna. That was amazing. I mean, if you look at it, it really is kind of, we're heading toward a nightmare scenario, especially during the pandemic. I mean, if you look at the stock market, which has been going up throughout the pandemic, and everyone's like, that's very weird. The economy is basically stopped, and the stock market keeps growing. But if you look at it, it's the top 5 tech stocks that are driving the entire increase of the stock market. Like if you take out the top 5 tech stocks, the stock market is actually down. So it's really being driven by Google, Facebook, Apple, these just sort of giant tech stocks, Amazon. And it's creating a situation where it really does feel like we're going to live in a world that is basically governed by these 4 or 5 corporations, right? And like, we need to start talking seriously about the possibility that this public square, right? Because the internet is, in a sense, the de facto public square today, and it is controlled by 2 or 3 corporations. I mean, it's really just a giant threat to our way of life, social well-being. There's no ability to have a functioning society if the public avenues through which we communicate are controlled by 2 or 3 corporations. And I think that you can connect something like this to what's going on with the U.S. Post Office and how it's being gutted and destroyed. The U.S. Post Office is actually a good model for what a potential public utility of online sort of social media, to call it something, could be, because the U.S. Postal Service, for all its problems and defunding and austerity that has caused it to get into like such a troubled space, actually does a pretty decent job of protecting privacy. Like when you send a letter on the U.S. Postal Service, like you don't worry that it's going to be kind of your privacy there is going to be violated, and it also has created an institution that has done a pretty good job of avoiding kind of partisan manipulation, beyond the sort of because the nightmare scenarios are like, right, you say you nationalize Facebook and Amazon, but then like, a good president comes in and he does blah, blah, blah. And then the bad president comes in and does like U.S. Postal Service has been able to maintain a certain degree of independence from whomever is in power at a certain point while still maintaining its public status. So it's something that it's worth thinking about as we go on, because if not, we're going to live in this kind of nightmare world where, you know, we all work for Amazon or Facebook.
I mean, I've been living, I mean, not to this extent that you just mentioned right now, but I mean, it's been a nightmare world for me for over a week now because of just the sheer volume of data, personal data that's been sold without my knowledge, right? And so the effort to fix that situation as a public figure, especially who is going to be targeted again in the future, has been very difficult. And I just want to quickly go back to what you mentioned about how our entire economy is really being driven by Silicon Valley capitalism. You're absolutely right about that. And that not only impacts the way that we're able to live our lives, it not only impacts our right to privacy and all of that, it also impacts foreign policy.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not a coincidence that the Trump administration has really been ratcheting up their war rhetoric toward China.
Yeah.
China is a significant threat to Silicon Valley capitalism. And so if our entire economy is based on that, that's a powerful incentive to engage in some sort of war with China to protect our economic interests, but also to protect our hegemony.
Yeah.
You know, that's a huge part of it as well. But that's a conversation for a different time.
Yeah. Well, no. So, yeah, I mean, I remember when the Snowden thing happened, the mind-numbing debates around like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, like you have nothing to worry about. And it's like, what, like, haven't you learned anything from any dystopian sci-fi novel or movie? Like, that's how it works. Like, it's not about, you know, the sort of fringe people doing the bad stuff. It's really about like people kind of growing up in an environment that creates a sense of self-censorship. It's like not even knowing what the alternatives are because you're being watched. You know what I mean? Like it's mind-numbing. I mean, that Eric Schmidt sound was just, I mean, it's just absolutely nightmarish.
I mean, yeah, absolutely nightmarish and very transparent. And he's not the only one. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook has said very similar things. And it's just like this framing that also gets repeated by mainstream press about how, again, if you're a good person, you have nothing to worry about. But this is not a debate about good people or bad people. This is something that negatively impacts the lives of every single person without the proper, without the proper model to function under. And right now, I just don't think that you can have true privacy and true freedom under a capitalistic society.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.